Chosen ones. Not all who are asleep were forced into slumber. Some chose the darkness willingly. There is a comfort in the stillness of ignorance, a warmth in pretending the storm outside doesn't exist. They wrap themselves in illusions like blankets, turning away from the sound of cracking skies, closed-eyed and numb. But you heard the whisper. You woke up in a world that begs you to sleep again, and now you wonder, why won't they rise with you? This message is not for the blind, but for those who close their eyes on purpose. They walk among you, faces lit by screens, hearts sedated by scripted joys and synthetic grief. You try to reach them, but their ears are tuned to another frequency, one engineered to keep truth sounding like static. It's not that they don't see the signs, it's that they saw just enough to turn back. Waking up requires sacrifice, and comfort is their idol. These are the ones who once asked for truth, but flinched when it arrived unfiltered. They dipped their toe in awakening and felt it burn. They learned enough to know awakening comes with cost, with responsibility, with grief. And so they crawled back into curated slumber, locking the door behind them. And yet, you're still trying to reach them, aren't you? The system smiles when you fail. It was built to cradle them into permanent passivity, to lull the rebels into routine. It doesn't fear the angry, it fears the aware. You waking up, that wasn't in its script. You calling others to rise, that's rebellion. You were marked the moment you questioned the dream, the moment you refused the numbness. That's why the resistance has been silent and constant, because your existence threatens their sleep. So what do you do when even the ones you love are clinging to their pillows? You keep speaking, because even in the deepest sleep, there's a crack, a shimmer, a tremble in the illusion. And when the time comes, it won't be your words they remember. It will be your refusal to fall back asleep. There's a silence that only the awakened can hear, a silence loud with fake laughter, artificial success, and perfectly filtered moments. Out there, the world is dreaming with its eyes wide open. A billion minds plugged into a loop that tells them everything is fine, while reality burns just beyond their line of sight. The truth has become dangerous, not because it harms, but because it threatens comfort. And so, the dream was redesigned to look more appealing than the real thing. They tell you to chase your goals, but not your soul. They applaud ambition, but crucify awareness. Look closer. The dream offers rewards, but only if you stay asleep. Attention has become currency. Emotion has become data, and those who choose to see beyond the veil are labeled broken. But what if the ones labeled broken are actually the only ones whole? Dreams used to be the place we escaped to. Now they're the prison bars wrapped in gold. They make you believe you're free while tethering your every move. You can have a voice, as long as it says nothing new. You can have freedom, as long as it follows their path. You can be yourself, as long as your self is algorithm approved. You walk through the world and see the signs, glazed eyes at bus stops, fake smiles behind polished desks, celebrations for things that don't matter, silence for the things that do. You wonder if they know. You wonder if they care. But mostly, you wonder if you'll be punished next for waking someone who didn't want to be disturbed. Because you're not just awake, you're awake and moving. and that movement triggers something ancient. The dreamers feel it in their gut, even if they can't name it. They feel the weight of your awareness, and it unsettles them. You become a mirror they didn't ask for. So they call you extreme, delusional, lost. They say, "It's not that deep." But you've already gone too deep to climb back up. And now you are standing at the fault line, torn between staying silent or sounding the alarm. He came with nothing flashy, no crown, no empire. Just a voice that cut through illusion like a blade of fire. And still they turned their heads. The fog was more familiar, the truth too blinding. Yeshua walked among them, healing the blind while the seeing refused to open their hearts. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. They had tasted the fog and found it sweet. The weight of awakening felt heavier than the chains of illusion. This is the same pattern you see now. The modern fog is digitized, monetized, and globalized. It wears the face of entertainment, the smile of convenience, the disguise of freedom. But at its core, it is the same rejection of truth, of love, of transformation. And when someone dares to point it out, the world turns on them, just like it did to him. The ones asleep now are not in comas. They are in contracts, bound by silent agreements with comfort, fear, and distraction. They agreed not to question. They agreed not to search. They agreed not to feel too deeply. And in return, they were promised safety, predictability, belonging. But what they received was a coffin with cushions, a life in a box labeled success, a heartbeat silenced by the hum of artificial peace. He tried to wake them with parables. You try with posts, with conversations, with your very presence. And still, they look at you as if you're the one who lost your way. That's how deep the fog goes. That's how thick the slumber becomes when it is chosen, not forced. They didn't just fall asleep. They built their beds in the illusion and called it home. And yet you keep going. Not because you're stronger, but because something in you was ignited. A spark that refuses to dim, no matter how thick the darkness grows. He knew what that was. He called it light. And he said those who carry it would not be hidden. Every swipe is a dose, every scroll another sedative. The glowing rectangle in their hand has become their prescription, keeping them calm, distracted, and detached. No questions, no chaos, just loops of entertainment, pre-filtered opinions, and the illusion of connection. The soul starves while the senses feast, and still they ask why they feel so hollow inside. But hollowness is the cost of sedation, especially the kind that masquerades as empowerment. They are not asleep in darkness. They are asleep in brightness, saturated colors, flashing lights, every message perfectly crafted to keep the mind busy while the spirit withers in silence. Even dreams have been digitized. Reality is no longer a place, it's a feed. One carefully tuned to never challenge, only affirm. They are told they are free while every algorithm leads them exactly where they're expected to go. You've felt it, haven't you? The resistance when you speak from a place they've never dared to visit. The discomfort in their silence. The way their eyes glaze over when you speak truth not sponsored by their feed. It's not that they can't hear you. It's that their ears have been tuned to a different frequency, one that flatters but never awakens, one that soothes but never confronts. There's a reason those who wake up feel alone at first, because they're stepping out of a collective quota, and no one likes being told they've been drugged by their own habits. So they lash out, or they ghost, or they laugh, nervously trying to pull you back into the safety of the scroll, back into silence. But silence isn't safety. Not when your spirit is screaming. Not when your dreams at night feel more real than your days. Not when you start to feel everything they've trained themselves not to feel. The unease, the discontent, the burning question no one dares say out loud. What if all of this is fake? You ask that, and you become the virus in their system. There's a passage whispered in the wind of forgotten scriptures. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. He didn't force it open. He didn't kick it down. He knocked. But even that gentle act became too much for some. They bolted the door, not because they feared the knock, but because they knew who it came from. And when the presence of truth stood that close, their illusions trembled. That same knock echoes still. Through you, through your eyes, through your questions, through your refusal to blend into the silence. But you've seen it, haven't you? The way they double lock their spirits when you speak. The way their laughter gets louder when you get closer to the core. They say you're too intense, too deep, too much. But really, it's not you they're afraid of. It's the echo behind your voice. Because there's something ancient in your presence. Something that reminds them of a place they've forgotten. A voice they once knew. A light they once felt. The light they traded for comfort, for belonging, for peace that costs nothing but buys even less. And when you show up, you remind them what they left behind. Yeshua's knock wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. But invitations come with choice. And choice terrifies those who have built altars around their numbness. To say yes to him would mean unlearning the safety they paid for with their soul. To open the door would mean letting light hit everything they've hidden. And so they shut it. Not because he wasn't love, but because love reveals. And now, in your own way, you've become the knock. Your very being is a tap on their spiritual door, not loud, not violent, but undeniable, and still they pretend not to hear. Or worse, they hear, and choose silence anyway. There's something they won't say out loud, but it leaks in the way the world reacts to your awakening. When you see too clearly, the system doesn't just get nervous, it stutters. You become a signal in the noise, a glitch in a loop that was designed to run without disruption. You're not just inconvenient, you're incompatible, because the system was built for sleepers, dreamers, participants, not disruptors. They gave you dreams preloaded, paths pre-designed, morals predefined. You were handed a life kit. Go here, work this, believe that, feel this, die quietly. But you noticed the gaps. You noticed the flicker in the matrix. And instead of ignoring it like the rest, you stared. You dared. You questioned the edges. That's when it happened. The pushback. Not always loud. Sometimes subtle. A job lost. A friend gone cold. An unexplained shadow on your momentum. That wasn't coincidence. That was a system trying to auto-correct itself. You don't have to protest in the streets to be a threat. All you have to do is stop swallowing what they serve. Stop pretending you're satisfied. Stop nodding when your spirit screams no. And suddenly, you're labeled unstable, negative, dangerous. Not because you're wrong, but because you see too much. Truth is the virus this program was never coded to handle. The illusion thrives on agreement. It feeds off repetition. The moment you interrupt it, even with a whisper, the entire fabric begins to unravel. Because if you could wake up, what's stopping others? If your presence breaks their loop, what happens if a few more rise with you? They try to reprogram you with fear. Flash headlines like warning signs. Make you believe you're alone, unsafe, unwise. But fear is the last firewall. After that, it's over, and they know it. That's why they fight so hard to put you back to sleep, not with violence, but with noise. He stood on the hill overlooking the city, and he wept. Not for the buildings, not for the noise, but for the people, hearts beating inside cages they mistook for kingdoms. They had access to truth and chose distraction. They were offered presence and opted for performance. What broke him wasn't their sin, it was their surrender. Their quiet decision to trade eternity for entertainment. And now, centuries later, his tears still echo. Only now, they bow to something glowing. You've seen them, heads down, eyes locked, attention stolen by screens that promise connection but deliver isolation. They scroll for meaning and settle for mimicry. They chase dopamine while starving for depth. The enemy never had to conquer them. All he had to do was entertain them to death. Not violently, but gradually, persistently, silently. The prophets of today aren't stoned, they're shadow banned. The truth isn't outlawed, it's filtered. And those who dare to speak beyond the algorithm become invisible in plain sight. It's not that the message is gone, it's that they've trained the masses not to hear it. And when someone like you arrives, refusing the script, refusing the mask, you become disruptive. Not because you yell, but because you see. Yeshua wasn't trying to impress the crowds. He didn't brand his message. He didn't trend. But he shattered illusions with a sentence. He healed not just bodies, but the blindness of generations. And yet even then, they chose silence over salvation. They preferred the illusion. They needed the numbness, because to follow him meant to awaken. And awakening hurts. You're not just waking up for yourself. You carry the same pulse, the same ache, the same mirror that makes people flinch. You walk into a room and shift the energy, not because you're loud, but because you're awake. You ask questions they avoid. You embody a presence they forgot they used to know. Sleep used to be rest, a pause, a reset. But now it's a trap with velvet lining. It doesn't just happen to people. They're led into it, gently, repeatedly. From the moment they're born, lullabies are played through systems, lights, screens, beliefs, patterns. Everything is designed to hush the soul before it even has the chance to speak. This isn't rest, this is design. Look around. The constant noise, the empty rituals, the pressure to conform. It's all part of a lullaby composed by those who benefit from a silenced population. Those who know that the moment someone wakes up, the entire illusion trembles. The powerful don't fear rebellion. They fear awareness. And so, they poison the food with chemicals, the minds with doctrine, the hearts with distraction, all to keep the sleepers dreaming obedient dreams. It's not just one trap, it's layers. School systems that don't teach you how to think, only what to think. Media that never tells you what's happening, only what to feel. Work that drains your body. Culture that numbs your spirit. And once you notice, it's impossible to unsee. The gears are exposed. The lullaby sounds more like a siren, and your presence inside that system becomes a threat. Because you no longer play along, they engineered sleep so well that those who wake up become foreign, alien even, to the dreamers. You'll hear them say you've changed, that you're distant, cold. But it's not distance they're feeling, it's contrast. You carry awareness they're not ready to face, and so they project their fear onto you, because it's easier to label someone crazy than to admit you're hypnotized. The cities were too loud, the temples too polished. So the whisper chose the wilderness, not because it was empty, but because it was pure, away from distraction, away from spectacle. That's where the voice was clearest. That's where Yeshua often retreated, not to escape the people, but to return to the frequency of truth. And from that silence came the whisper, "Awake, my beloved." It was never shouted, never forced. It arrived like a breeze against scorched skin, subtle but unmistakable. Now, that same whisper weaves through time, through static, through screens and noise, and the artificial glow of everything they've built to keep it out. It doesn't demand attention. It beckons it. And those who hear it never hear it with their ears. It speaks deeper, into marrow, into memory. You heard it, not in a sermon, not from a stage, but in a moment that didn't make sense to anyone else. Maybe you were alone, maybe surrounded, but suddenly everything cracked, and you knew something real had touched you. The illusion shattered, and your soul sat up in a world still asleep. That was the whisper. That was the call. Awake, my beloved. Not awake, my servant. Not awake, my soldier, but beloved. Because love, not fear, is what wakes people fully. And the reason many resist awakening is because they confuse love with control. But this voice has no chains, no agenda. It doesn't dominate, it invites. That's why so few recognize it when it comes. The world is trained to follow noise, to be led by fear, to chase after anything loud and urgent. So when the whisper comes, they miss it or mock it. But you didn't. You heard it, and you responded. And now, like him, you find yourself drawn to the wilderness, not the desert of sand, but the desert of the soul. The places in people where things have grown dry, forgotten, barren, and when you speak from that place, your voice carries the echo of the one who called you. It's easy to call them lost, to believe they've simply fallen under some spell, but look closer. Some of them know, not everything, but enough. Enough to sense the cracks, enough to catch glimpses of something deeper behind the veil. And still, they turn away. Not because they don't see it, but because they do, and it terrifies them. They're not just asleep, they're hiding. The dream offers them something reality never could: control. In the dream, they get to decide who they are, what they feel, and when they're seen. They curate it, shape it, crop the pain, filter the longing. In that world, vulnerability isn't required, it's replaced. And when the truth starts tapping at the edges, they double down on the performance. It's not ignorance, it's fear disguised as preference. You've spoken truth to them, watched it land, watched their expression shift for just a second, then watched them laugh it off. Change the subject. Look away. That's the hiding. It's strategic. It's practiced. Because if they really let your words in, if they let the walls fall even for a moment, everything they've built could collapse. And that's a risk they're not willing to take. Not yet. So they hide in their jobs, their jokes, their opinions, even their dreams. You ask, why don't they want more? But they've convinced themselves this is all there is, that this dream is safer than the ache of awakening. Because awakening doesn't just expose the lie. It demands action, and some aren't ready to move. You've probably felt the ache of trying, reaching, pouring out truth only to be met with silence. But understand, what you're feeling isn't rejection. It's resistance, not against you, but against the memory you stir inside them. They're not rejecting your words. They're rejecting the possibility that they might be true. And if they are true, then everything must change. You didn't ask to be the signal. You didn't sign up to be the disruption. But your awakening wasn't random. It was timed. And it didn't just free you, it triggered something in them. Your clarity, your presence, your refusal to blend back in. All of it became a ripple in their dreamscape, a flicker, a glitch, an alarm. And even if they pretend they didn't hear it, they did. They saw the shift in your eyes before you ever said a word. They felt your silence pressing against their noise. You didn't even need to explain. Your being said enough. That's why some pulled closer and others pulled away. Because your awakening forced a confrontation with their slumber. And not everyone was ready for that. Some still aren't. But the timing of your awakening wasn't a coincidence. It was a countdown. Something has been building behind the scenes. Something vast, spiritual, tectonic. And the world needed a few lights to flicker on before the blackout. Not just to survive it, but to lead through it, to burn through it. You are one of them. Not because you're better, but because you didn't ignore the whisper. You didn't numb the ache. You followed the breadcrumbs of discomfort into places others were too afraid to go. And now that you've seen what's real, you are what's real. That truth radiates from you like morning through a locked window. Even if they cover their eyes, the light still finds a way in. And for some, that's enough. Your presence will awaken those you never even speak to. Because truth doesn't always need volume. It just needs consistency. You show up. You stay awake. And that becomes the invitation. The alarm. The friction. The mirror. One day, without warning, someone will remember something they saw in you. And it'll unravel the chains they didn't know they still wore.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.